Welcome to the Rock Interview Series with host Thomas S. Orwatt Jr.
Welcome to episode number 62 of the Rock Interview Series. I'm Thomas Orwatt Jr. It is September 15th, 2022, and for this feature, I have guitarist Jeff Young as my guest. In 1985, Jeff graduated from the prestigious GIT, Guitar Institute of Technology. He then went on to become the lead guitarist of the metal band Megadeth from 1987 to 1989. During that time, Jeff performed on the Megadeth release So Far, So Good, So What. Currently, Jeff is in a band called Kings of Thrash, which also features former Megadeth members David Ellefson on bass and Chris Poland on guitar. What follows is an exclusive interview in which Jeff discusses his new band, his time in Megadeth, and much more. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode number 62 of the Rock Interview Series. Today, we have a great special guest. We have guitar superstar Jeff Young with us. Jeff is currently in a band called the Kings of Thrash, and most of you know him as being the lead guitar player in Megadeth from 1987 to 1989. Jeff, thank you very much for taking the time out to talk to me here at the Rock Interview Series.
You're so welcome. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. The Kings of Thrash, there seems to be a real big buzz about this band. It's a band that features ex-members of Megadeth. Dave Ellefson is one of the members of the band. Chris Poland, who played guitar on the first two Megadeth records, is also a member of the band. And you, of course. So let's start from the beginning. How did this band start off?
Oh, it was a lifetime in the unmaking, wasn't it? The catalyst for this go-round, I know David had some idea to do something like this, even as far back as a year ago or more. But I was invited to film for the Nick Menza documentary that they're doing about Nick's life and untimely passing. Of course, Nick played on quite a few of the Megadeth albums. And it's going to be released on Ellefson Films. So David obviously is involved. They filmed here in LA. And we had a dinner the evening before the filming at the Rainbow in the back booth, very much American Satan. If you've seen that movie, it's the same booth. And we were getting along really good, reminiscing, and I had reminded him of a demo that he and I had worked on right during the Rust in Peace writing sessions before I departed and exited stage left. And I actually sang him a couple of the riffs from it because I had remembered it, although we lost the cassette tape with the demo. After all these years, there was a couple parts that still stuck with me, and I sang them to him as we were paying the bill. He's like, oh man, we got to get in a room and work that stuff out. So it actually started from a set of 4 original songs that we've begun together. They're already all demoed up musically. And one thing led to the next. There's a event in Los Angeles that happens at the Whiskey A Go-Go called the Ultimate Jam. It's been going on for years, and I've been participating probably for the past few months. And one of the themes they did was the Big Four. They do it every 2 weeks. It's a bi-weekly event, and they invited me. And of course, since we were already working on these originals, we thought it was the perfect opportunity for Dave and I to reunite on stage and play. They kind of make different musicians, so you never know who you're going to get, maybe as your singer, guitar player. But we had a beautiful jam that night, and that was really the catalyst. We said, this is so cool, we got to do more of this.
So you actually have some dates scheduled to play. It's called the Mega Years, and you're going to be concentrating on the early Megadeth records. Obviously, one of the records the one record that you played on is going to be one of the records that's going to be featured. So Far, So Good, So What. So the early stuff. So the ones that Chris Poland also played on. What are the shows going to be like? Is it going to be just basically Megadeth material from those early records, or are you going to be throwing some new originals in there as well?
you never know what surprises we might have in store, but for sure, it's So Far So Good So What in its entirety, which
Okay.
has never been done, and Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good in its entirety. And that's two pretty exhilarating albums to perform and have been to learn. We got some surprises in store for the encore, and it just depends as far as busting out one of the originals. We're setting that goal, but we don't want to rush it. I mean, songs kind of write themselves. So we have the music demoed, and we kind of know how that is. We're writing the vocals right now, which we want to take a great deal of care with. And if we can get it done in time, we may just bust that out.
Yeah, it's gonna be you have 4 dates scheduled already. I'm sure there's got to be some demand for more dates than just 4 because I know just from reading like the Facebook like post and comments, a lot of people are really excited about this project.
Yeah, us included. I mean, it's super cool. Chris and I never had the opportunity to play together, and that's meshing famously. Our sounds, our styles, the way we're orchestrating the parts, and we have 3 guitars. Sometimes, I mean, Chaz the singer also plays guitar, so we're orchestrating it. Sometimes if you think of great 3 guitar bands like Skynyrd or the Allman Brothers, even Iron Maiden, there's been others. Sometimes Chaz just lays out and lets the guitar hang and sing. So it's great to have that extra guitar when we want it. And we're just having a great time working out the pieces, playing together. And I was just talking to David, I think yesterday, and I mentioned that it's just an amazing feeling as I was setting up rehearsal. So again, I was mentioning Chris and I are having a blast playing together. We have 2 young musicians who are also big Megadeth aficionados. Fred, our drummer's from Peru, Fred Aiken, and he sent me a picture of him and Nick Menza. I don't know where they met, but he's coming in nailing. In the first rehearsal, he's got every drum beat perfect, and you barely have to give the guy any notes. Chaz, our singer, was just amazing find. I think the reason we're doing this is because of the fact we found this front person who can deliver the songs, because it's not an easy thing to do.
Right.
He fronts a Megadeth tribute, so he already had the running start. He fronts a Soundgarden tribute, so he has a little bit of that Chris Cornell huskiness to his voice, and he gets all the affectations without imitating the vocals, and it just comes off really convincing, as you've probably noticed in some of the rehearsal footage we've released. So we're just having a blast orchestrating the show, making sure, literally going through every measure, every cell, every phrase, and making sure that we bring out the musicality of it, the dynamics, the tempo. We're actually bringing some of the tempos on the Killing Is My Business songs slower than they were. There was maybe some artificial enhancement that might have sped the tempos up back then in the day. And there's some really beautiful music on that album, riffs, solos, that may have got lost in translation because of either the production or how fast the tempos were performed. When you pull them back, a song like Killing Is My Business has a real funk vibe to it in certain parts, right?
Sure.
And that's so interesting. The other song, Skull Beneath the Skin, the verse in that's super funky. And when you bring it back just like 4, 5, 6 metronome markings, I think it's going to allow people to really hear, the spaces, the notes, and really maybe understand and interpret the music in a way that it maybe flew over their heads the first time. So I think that first album is going to get a lot of love after these 4 shows, and hopefully So Far So Good So What as well, because a lot of Megadeth fans and music and hard rock and metal fans miss that era of Megadeth. They maybe came in on Rust in Peace or Countdown to Extinction or even later. So they never got to see any of those songs perform live. And they probably wouldn't had we not kind of lucked fortuitously into this chemistry of people that have all fallen together. Because
Yeah.
we didn't intend this tour to happen. We just started to write some originals, and the whole thing through that ultimate jam and the people that we met, and all the people around the project that are so positive. And that's the cool thing I started to mention, is that David, Chris, and I came out of a band that has a lot of negativity and toxicity around it, and there's been a lot of lies and mudslinging and disinfo, pushed in our directions. And it's just amazing that we've all come together all these years later, more mature and arguably better musicians. And everything is so positive and effortless, from the rehearsals, everyone involved, to all the people around the project that are helping us, propel it and get it off the ground. So
Yeah.
it's really refreshing, and we're all kind of like pinching ourselves as we're getting closer, and we're still a month away. Today is a month away from the Whiskey Show in Hollywood. That was kind of the catalyst for this whole thing. So it's fortuitous we're doing this interview this afternoon.
Yeah. Jeff, is this going to be a long-term project? I know it's maybe, everyone goes into a project thinking that it has legs, but you guys think you're going to, spend a lot of time. Is this going to be more than just a 1-year project? Are we going to hear about the Kings of Thrash like in 5 years from now also?
The funny thing is, we didn't really even dub the band name Kings of Thrash. That was kind of the name for the tour, but it's kind of,
yeah,
because we wouldn't be so presumptuous to say, but it was more of, and originally it was going to be a big four where we were going to have an Anthrax, Slayer, and Metallica thing, but we focused it in, and that name just kind of stuck. It's kind of cool. And it's not really applied to us, but more just the genre and everyone, the audience, everyone that's involved. The originals are really cool. As excited as we are to do this, we're doubly, triply excited to get the original stuff out. We've already talked to a couple labels, and oddly enough, it was that same table at the Rainbow. What's about that back table at the Rainbow Bar and Grill? And the idea was to release a 4 or 5 song EP, maybe even include some live stuff from this tour.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're recording the Arizona show.
Wow.
So Phoenix, be ready to be loud.
Yeah, we got to get you on the East Coast for this. Have you heard anything from Dave Mustaine about this project? Has he given you his blessings, or has he been pissed about it, or any kind of reaction from him yet that you know of?
We're really not concerned. I don't pay attention. I haven't really listened or paid attention or followed Megadeth since I think I heard the Rust in Peace album a couple times, right? And then what you might hear on the radio or in the press. I haven't heard anything. For us, this isn't about any spite or retaliation. It's a celebration of the music that we were all a part of, right? That we helped create, and it's fun for us to do this. It's going to take us a while to craft these originals, and we didn't want to wait around. People say, hey, you should do this. And we said, hey, yeah, you're right. We should do this. And it's a win-win. It's a win for us, and it's a win for him, because, any performance royalties, anything, if we did include live tracks, he would make money off that. It's promoting albums that hopefully fans will go back and buy, which is putting money right in his pocket. Especially The Killing is my business album. I think a lot of people are going to go back and want to rediscover that album after this tour.
Yeah,
so for us, it's all about positivity. We're all in this moment. We're living in the moment, and we're not looking beyond. We're not reading any of the comments on Blabbermouth or any of this stuff, because we know what our intent is, and intent is everything. And our intent's positive. We like playing together. We know we're crafting original music. We're not relying on this. We don't need to ride the coattails of this. This is just something that the fans wanted, and you want to give fans what they want. If you get, hundreds of emails every year and requests year after year after year, and people you meet, say that would be so great to see, a reunion of Megadeth, and you perform the So Far So Good So What album in its entirety. Fans that have that nostalgia want to hear that. And the Killing Out, we wanted to give them more than that. It was the manager's idea to do the Killing album. And we said, yeah. And it's a bitch of an album to perform. Both of these together, it's like we're training up like we're trained to go to the Olympics, because to tremolo and pedal and play this fast, for that long of a set, I kind of, it's not like playing the Rolling Stones or AC/DC or something like that.
Sure.
I was kind of explaining to my gal, and I have this analogy, in a lot of rock and pop music, the band's kind of camping out, taking a nap in the hammock, while the singer's doing all the heavy lifting in the verses and the chorus. I mean, it's vocal driven music, and there's very basic stuff usually happening while the singing's going on, and that's not the case with this music. It's as hard as jazz or classical. There are influences from both, because Chris and Gar obviously came from that world. So the Killing album and the Peace Sells album have that influence. There's a punk influence. We all love the Sex Pistols and the Clash, and so you hear that more on So Far So Good So What, right? So, and I think the fans who come from the 80s all the way to the Megadeth fans that love all the newer stuff will enjoy this show, because there's something in it for everybody. If you're a guitar player, you're going to love it. If you love the catalog, the back catalog, you're going to dig it, I think.
Yeah.
And if you just love loud music and watching big mosh pits erupt, I think we could expect some of that.
Yeah, I can definitely think that your band would be really cool, like on a festival bill, or co-headlining with some other pretty big band and playing amphitheaters or something in the summer. I think that would be a great metal bill.
Yeah, like the Pantera reunion thing.
There you go.
Double bill, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So our booking agent booked Zach Wild and Zach Sabbath and all this stuff. So you never know what can happen, but we're definitely talking to some festivals. We're doing some horror conventions in November. There's one in Chicago. It's called Days of the Dead. I think it happens in Atlanta in January. That'll just be Chris, David, and I. We're going to be performing like 4 or 5 Megadeth songs with a local band and hanging out and meeting people. But yeah, we'd love to take this. You can see online, people are saying, bring it here, bring it there, bring it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier.
We'd love to.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of our team putting it all together and getting these first 4 shows. And I think once people start seeing videos of the shows and people take it in,
yeah,
I
it's
think
going to
we
be
can
big.
expect more in the next year.
Yeah. I want to go back and talk about when you joined Megadeth in 1987. It was kind of a unique situation in that there was already a guitarist in the band, Jay Reynolds, who happened to be a student of yours. You were a guitar teacher at the time. What happened? So Jay's in the band, and you're helping him out, and then you ultimately take over for him, correct?
It was a crazy serendipitous story that, I mean, it's out of a Hollywood movie, how it happened. After I had graduated from the Guitar Institution of Technology, it was about 3.5 years before I got a band together that was solid and a manager. There was a placement service in Los Angeles at the time that was really like nothing else before or since, called Rock Congress, run by a lady named Lucy Forbes, and she was kind of like a tough, cool biker chick, and she had a sidekick. And it was a placement service for musicians where you would put your photo and demo, at this time cassette tape, on file. And I know that Alice Cooper got some of his band members, King Cobra, Carmine Apice's band,
Right.
was put together, and many other bands out of the LA area at the time kind of came out of this placement service for musicians, which was kind of cool. Well, I heard about it and I went down, took my tape, and they put it in the cassette player, and the girl was listening, and she goes, "Wait a second, this is you? You wrote these songs? We love these songs. We have your bass player, Alan Hearn, on file here." My bass player had already gone down, and they had already heard the stuff, and literally by later that evening, I was sitting in the living room of Barry Levine, who is the guy who did the Girls, Girls, Girls album cover for Motley Crue. He did the Shout at the Devil, the beautiful photos in the center. He did the Girls, Girls, Girls video while I was living in his house. He did the Angel on Earth as It Is in Heaven album cover with the upside down logo and band.
Right. That's very cool.
He's working with Gene Simmons to this day. I know he was involved in the movie Detroit Rock City, and this was all stuff that he did before and since we worked together. But that night he said, "I want to manage you. You know, I want to break out of photography, getting into managing bands." Oddly enough, living in the back of the house was Punky Meadows from Angel.
Wow.
So he was my roommate, which was a trip because he never really came into the main house. Like I saw him, I think, all at 2 or 3 times in the entire time I lived there. But the great thing, there was a 16-track analog 2-inch tape studio upstairs in the house, which I quickly moved into. I was living upstairs where the studio was, and my band sometimes crashing on the floor of the studio. We were working all the time and learning a lot about working in the studio. Well, downstairs, literally right under my room, was Jay Reynolds' bedroom. And he was just an informal guitar student. He never paid me. It was just like we were in the house and had nothing to do. And he'd say, "Hey, can you show me this or that?" And it was very informal up to that point. And this band, Broken Silence, got really close to a deal with Chrysalis. We showcased at the Roxy, and Motley Crue, the Bangles, Stray Cats all showed up at our thing. All the labels were there. But the band imploded. I'll spare you the gory details. And I moved out of the house and lost contact with Barry for 4 or 5 months. And the strangest thing, and it's just, even looking back at it today, it just blows my mind. I was telling Chris Poland about it the other day after rehearsal. I was playing with Chris's brother, Mark Poland, in a band that had nothing to do with Megadeth. That was no path or avenue. I had lost touch with Jay and Barry and anyone in that house. The band was more like kind of a Euro guitar thing, like a Gary Moore, John Norum, John Sykes, Thin Lizzy kind of thing with my own spin on it. And Mark was my drummer, and we were demoing songs on 4-track and writing new tunes. One day I got just an intuition that I should bury the hatchet with Barry, right? And I called him up, and he had moved out of the band house, and so many great stories about that house we'll save for my book. But he was living behind Guitar Center on Sunset Boulevard with his girlfriend at this time. And I said, "Hey, how about I come over? I'll bring over the demo I'm working on with this cool drummer." And he had a new band he was working with, and I went over and we were hanging out around his kitchen table just playing demos. And I was literally getting ready to leave, and his phone rang, and he picked it up, and I was kind of just getting my stuff together, and I noticed he kind of went like white, like shocked for a moment. He was like, "Well, this is so strange." He was taken aback. He goes, "This is so strange because I haven't seen him in 5 months, and he's sitting at my kitchen table." And he passed the phone to me, and it was Jay Reynolds calling, looking for me. And he was all cryptic. He's, Jeff, I got a big opportunity I want to discuss with you. I'm living in Laurel Canyon now. Can you stop by my house anytime in the near future? And I was on my way home from Hollywood, and I could drive right over Laurel Canyon. I stopped. He was living, and that's the area where it's happened. The whole Laurel Canyon movement went down, back in the 70s. So it was kind of a core area that this whole offer transpired. I went in, and he said, "I got the gig as Megadeth's new lead guitar player." And he played me some of that, the Peace Cell stuff. Honestly, he had told me that they were going to replace Chris and Gar earlier, like months and months before. And would I be interested? And it was just, I'd never heard anything like it. It was like so heavy and it was so different. And I was just like, I don't know about that. But I remember how great Chris was. And my first impression was like, this guy has definitely listened to Alan Holdsworth and Jeff Beck and Mahavishnu and Jan Hammer, right? And so I was like, this lead guitar player is amazing, right? So that stuck with me. So flash forward to that meeting with Jay in Laurel Canyon, and he said he got the gig with Megadeth and it wasn't computing because I knew how he played. And he was kind of, played like a fourth or fifth year rhythm guitar player, right? Who had a major label deal in a Judas Priest knockoff band. So I was like thinking, there's no way this guy can do this gig. And I said, yeah. He's like, I'll pay you $50 an hour to help me figure out Chris's solos from Peace Cells and Killing, because they were doing like 4 songs. So I had learned 4 of those songs way back in the day, but all of this album that I've learned now has been first time around. And help him write solos for what was going to be So Far So Good So What, and they had 2 weeks to do it before their first tour dates.
Wow.
And so I said, sure, I'll do that. And so I was going to meet him down at the Music Grinder Studios the next day to commence lessons. And as I finished driving home, I didn't even wait till I got home. I stopped at a payphone. Kids, back in the day, we had these phones like at a 7-Eleven in the parking lot on a pole. I actually drove by it. You can still see in the concrete where the phone was. I called my parents back in Dayton, Ohio. I said, Mom, Dad, I got this opportunity. I'm teaching this kid, this buddy of mine, who got this gig in this band and they're on Capitol Records. The same label as the Beatles, the round building in Hollywood. And both my parents are on 2 extensions back in Ohio. And I go, I can take this gig because they knew Alan Holdsworth, because oddly enough, the night before I left Ohio to go to GIT and drive across the country, scared out of my wits to come to Hollywood by myself, Alan Holdsworth played our hometown at the local jazz club Jilly's, and I took my parents to see him because I knew Alan had jammed with Eddie Van Halen at GIT. And I wanted them to see that I wasn't going out to Hollywood for sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You see the shirt I'm wearing, like Randy Rhoads was more about study your guitar, be cool and then rock and roll, right? And that was kind of my philosophy. And they saw Alan Holdsworth, so they saw kind of that I had a higher aspiration than, wanting to go out and do maybe some of the albums, the music they heard pouring out of my bedroom off my turntable. So I told my parents, I can get this gig. This guitar player is so good. He plays like Alan Holdsworth. And my parents were thinking back on that, going, this guy won't do this gig no matter how many lessons I give him. Not this week, not next month, not next year. I can steal this gig. And my parents, whoa. They said, Jeff, don't do it that. Don't do it that way. And they really set me right. They put me in the right position, like energetically, to go in and just teach him the best that I could, help him write solos, figure out Chris's solos. And if the guys in Megadeth were smart, they'd hear it for themselves. And that's exactly what happened, because as I was giving him lessons, they would walk through the room just passing by, and they'd give a look, and they'd be like, and they'd see me. The first thing I tried to teach him that I started coming up with was the solo to hook and mouth, which I thought I was trying to come up with something kind of Michael Schenkery, because he liked Michael Schenker, and as I did, and something more repetitive, kind of like a Flight of the Bumblebee. But as I started writing, and it's super hard to play, like as hard as a even to this day, it's something I've always used all 3 of these years to keep my chops up, was that solo from Hook and Mouth. And they saw me playing it effortlessly and him struggling to play it. So it was just a few days till I came home from a rodeo one night with my buddy. And oddly enough, on the drive home, I was talking about leaving LA. Like, this is a city full of posers, and all the kids that, all the things my parents were afraid of me getting into, that's what I found when I got to Hollywood. And I wanted to be somewhere more like Austin, because I looked up to Charlie Sexton from Archangels and Eric Johnson and Stevie Ray Vaughan. And I said, man, Austin could be really cool. New York seemed like it, I didn't know, I was really leaning like Austin. I got home and my answer machine was flashing and it was Dave Mustaine with a message. Can you come down to the Music Grinder tomorrow? I want to talk to you about, it's kind of like Jay, I got an opportunity for you.
Right.
And so I went down and he gave me the cassette with about 60, 70 seconds in my darkest hour. Okay, come back tomorrow and lay a solo, start here and there. So there was like no rehearsing with the band or hearing an entire track to get context of the song or hearing vocals. I just heard like that much of a song, like maybe a 10-15 second roll up, start here and there. And I went home that night and I did an interview earlier today, and I always say this regardless, that success, they always say, is when luck and preparation intersect. And that's exactly what happened here. Like the story with Barry, when I went to his house, like, why did that happen and how did that happen? That kismet, that destiny. I was just fresh out of GIT, and I remember Gary Moore, Victims of the Future album had just come out, and I was really working, trying to earball and figure out a lot of his licks off that album that was so percussive. And you can kind of hear that on the Megadeth album. So my chops were really up at that point. So when the opportunity came, the luck, I was ready to go in there the next night. And the solo that I did on In My Darkest Hour was improvised. For the most part, I kind of got a sketch, just like an artist. I sat home that night and sketched out some ideas in my mind. And I went in and I was kind of nervous because there was Ellefson and Bueller and the second engineer and Paul Lanny. So I just went back to the back of the room and I turned my back to the control board, which is kind of cool because it's really good to listen to music with the speakers behind you, the way our ears are designed. So I was hearing it and I just faced the wall and tuned the whole rest of the room out. And I just did the solo and they liked it. I remember Paul Lanny had just done the Alcatraz Disturbing the Peace album with Steve Vai, and he said, I haven't had this much fun working with a guitar player since I worked with Steve Vai on the Alcatraz. So that gave me like, okay, I'm feeling good. I went home that night. They gave me another cassette. I think I came back and did Hook and Mouth because I knew that. And then that didn't take that long. So I was there and they go, here. And I went in the other room and I think I just came up with 502 on the spot and went in and did that. And every day was like that because they only had 2 weeks to finish the album. And then we did a quick West Coast tour and then flew to the UK for Christmas on Earth with Testament and Overkill. And so it was kind of like out of the fire into the frying pan.
Yeah, wow. I have so many questions to ask you all about that. First of all, how did Jay Reynolds react to you taking his spot?
Well, how anyone would react, how you or I would react, they started bringing Capitol Records executives down to the studio and listening to my solos, and everyone's jumping up and down. And he was kind of telling Ellefson, like, maybe you should keep this on the QT and not let them know Jeff's doing this. I mean, I don't know how he thought I was going to teach him how to play these and he was going to be ready that quick. Because, you can hear the solos are like, even great guitar players that have been in Megadeth don't replicate the solos. So, and it's a really hard thing to do. I know because I took the time to do it with Chris's solos and it's not easy to do. So I remember, and that was the funny thing is that David Ellefson and I had to have the talk with him. We walked down Melrose Boulevard again and took Jay to some restaurant and sat him down and said, well, Jeff's going to be doing it and you're not. And I felt bad, but I didn't know him that well, to be honest. And life happens, and I'm pretty sure anyone in my shoes would have done the same thing because opportunity only knocks so many times. And I was teaching guitar lessons in Hollywood and playing for four walls. And the applause is much more deafening when you're playing for 30,000 people, every night.
Yeah. Did Jay get a refund on his $50 per hour that he paid you?
No, sorry, he didn't. I can't say he did. I think Megadeth was paying it. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Awesome. Well,
his behalf.
there's a lot of
question, though.
thanks. There's a lot of rumors I've read about, like, what it was like recording that record. And that Dave Mustaine was really struggling with drugs at the time. Is that true? Was that a detriment in recording that record at all?
I was isolated from it because all his recording, I didn't wasn't in the room for any of it. I heard some of the leads he had done as they were comping them together from multiple takes when I was in the other room. The rhythms were done, drums were done. I mean, again, there's 2 weeks left. I think maybe he went in after I was done and finished some vocals. But I was kind of isolated from it. The first time I knew anything, I was pretty green. I mean, I'd been locked in my room since I was a kid, first grade viola, from then I switched to sax from third to ninth grade, and then I discovered guitar. And between all that and playing radio station in my closet when I was a kid, I didn't hang around a lot of people. I was pretty naive. From Dayton, Ohio, I didn't really go out a lot once I got to Hollywood. So one night, the guitar tech, didn't show up for the tracking session. And I was like, okay. And we're kind of like waiting around. Are we going to start? And Chuck Bueller took me in the other room where I would sit with the cassette player and earball stuff and write my solos. And he said, Gadget's not going to be here tonight because he's in jail. And I said, he's in jail? He goes, yeah, he got Pop scoring black tar heroin from a stain in East LA. And at that moment, I remember the exact ticker tape that went across my head was like, okay, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. I'm going to stay in this project as long as it's healthy for me. And you saw how long that was.
Yeah, it was
So
only 2 years.
it wasn't around me, so I was sheltered from it. Like even how they recorded the drums with the cymbals separately, I didn't see any of that because they were all done. So for me, and to be honest, Paul Lanny wasn't there, and there's been rumors about solos being sung, which is just outlandish. The only people in the studio really after that first couple days was the second engineer, Matt Freeman, who was a kid. He looked like he was 17 years old. He was punching me in, and me by ourselves. I don't know why. Maybe it was because of the drugs, and that worked to my advantage, that they just gave us free reign. Once they heard In My Darkest Hour, maybe they trusted me and they just let me go. But so I was kind of like just going in, doing my solos, having a blast, and leaving. And it wasn't until we got on tour that I started seeing the party in full force.
Yeah. And you guys went out. I think when you played North America, you went out with Dio, right? And Iron Maiden, correct?
Was Dio first on the Dream Evil tour?
Mm-hmm.
And we did that like right away. So Far wasn't even out for a few months, and we had the Peace Sells backdrop still. And then it did come out, and it went to 19 on Billboard, and Dio was really polite and came in our dressing room and congratulated us, while Dream Evil's like 69 on the charts. So we felt really good about that at that time. And he was a gentleman, and everything everyone has ever said about Dio, I could say 10 times over, including he never sang a bad note one night on the tour. The Iron Maiden thing happened because Guns N' Roses got fired from the tour because Axl got snarky in the catering. He forgot his catering pass, and they didn't want to feed him. And he said, "Don't you know who I am? I'm motherfucking Axl Rose." And Maiden they're gentlemen. They're not going to play that.
Yeah.
So we ended up taking several dates on the Seventh Son of the Seventh Son tour, which was really cool because going from the None More Black, like Dio thing, and everything so black and metal, then you're on that stage that's like Antarctica.
Right. I remember that.
You're like, it's all white. And so that was kind of cool. And just that led to us doing the Monsters of Rock, Castle Downington, which was my last gig with the band. And Roses video, Paradise City, all the black and white footage, kind of the first half is color footage from America. And you see they get on the Concorde because they had to get over there pronto. And then all the black and white footage of that huge crowd and the people going like that.
Yeah.
That was
that gig.
They opened for us, so that was the crowd right before we came on.
Wow, there was like 100,000 people at that gig, right?
125, according to Gene Simmons. It was Iron Maiden, Kiss, David Lee Roth, uh, with Steve Vai, but Billy Sheehan had already left. They had the Bissonette brothers, Matt Bissonette on bass. Megadeth, Guns N' Roses, and Halloween opened the
Wow.
show.
Yeah, so that was your
Great
last
way
gig
to
with.
go out. That was a great
Yeah,
last.
I was just gonna say that definitely. I want to go back to your very first gig that you played with Megadeth. Was that on the Dio tour? Was that the very first time you played with Megadeth?
Oh no, no. We did a West Coast tour of like theaters, and
Oh,
then
okay,
we went over to Europe and did that Christmas on Earth festival with Testament and Overkill, and then Dio
right.
Dream Evil tour.
Okay, so what was your first gig like Megadeth like? I mean, are you nervous? Are you like, really anxious to get on stage and prove what you can do? What was going through your head
There
that
were
first
so
gig?
many gigs that's hard to remember the first one. And I just remember that was when, I mean, there's kind of been two phases in my life where I kind of got over what you call butterflies or stage fright. I think then it was more kind of an in your head, like immature, like, okay, I'm good enough to be in this kind of a band. I don't need to be nervous. Like later in life, from a more spiritual Zen perspective, I think you realize that, hopefully you realize, I don't think all musicians realize this, but you're not there to impress people, or people aren't there to see you or prop you up or fluff your ego or see how fast you can play. They're there to be moved by frequency and sound, and you're in a way like a doctor of sound, right? And
Sure.
music can heal. Bob Marley, you asked me about the Bob Marley speaker behind me. I'm a huge fan of his, to the extent that I didn't just go to his home in Kingston and Tough Gong Studios. I went way out in the jungle, 5 hours to where he was born, and almost got mugged by
Yeah, I was
Jamaicans.
gonna say you survived that. That's pretty
Oh,
incredible.
it was scary, dude. But Bob Marley, I'm getting chills talking about it. But how Bob really believed. I mean, think of his lyrics and how so much of the, not just poetry but truth he spoke, that's been lost on people and wrapped up into a brand of ganja and branding and something that's not at all what he was about. But he was one of the original doctors of medicine who knew that you can heal and you can elevate people's consciousness with sound, with frequency. I mean, and once you realize that, that's a great shift for your stage fright or your butterflies, because you're not trying to impress anyone anymore. You're there to give something to, like, it's like a ceremony, right? Everyone is there, hopefully, to leave your problems behind for a while, to forget, your job, to listen to the message of the lyrics, to just take in the frequencies that are coming out of the instruments. That's something that we don't even think about in our consciousness, that's hitting us in a way, that's why, just to make a quick point about the original stuff, I've been really adamant about recording it analog, because we're
Mhm.
analog creatures.
Yeah.
We're not really meant to input digital information into our psyche. You heard Neil Young talk about that, and it might get loud about when they went to Pro Tools and digital. So all that stuff and how sound is, I think maybe that's why people aren't as into music as they used to be when it was delivered via an analog source. I'm just putting that out there.
That's interesting. Never really heard anyone explain it like that before. But yeah, I think you have a good point there. Yeah.
And that's a little bit more embellishment on like how to get over stage fright. But I think musicians and maybe even people who have to speak in public, who maybe get nervous talking at their company meeting, you're there. It's not about impressing people or anything. You're there to give a message, or that it's what's in it for the audience, not what's in it for you.
Hmm.
Once you make that shift, it's a liberating, freeing thing, and that is something that we have now with this Kings of Thrash and delivering these songs today, that we didn't have that musicality back then. So to be able to have the luxury and the opportunity to play these songs these years later, when we've had all this growth as musicians and as people, it's the coolest thing ever. I can't believe this is even happening.
Yeah.
To be
Yeah.
honest.
It is pretty incredible.
I'm kissing the ground every day, and Chris and me together with our sounds on the same side of the stage, they complement each other so well. And the way we play together, and it's just, we're all working so hard on every measure and every phrase, everyone in the band, to make sure that we deliver each. It's like a book, you know, you don't memorize the whole book in one sitting, or you don't read it in one sitting. And when you come to a concert, especially with a lot of notes and there's a lot of notes coming off the stage, that in an evening in a Megadeth show, again, slowing the tempos down. Maybe we call it the Bonham lag. You hear it in Black Dog, how John Bonham used to know how to make the measures elastic. It wasn't always just on a click track.
Yeah.
Which a lot of the music from the 70s, great Van Halen albums, you know, you can hear it's not on a click. Working with all that stuff, that's so much fun. We never even had the time to think about that back in the day. We were 25, 6-year-old kids. So now coming to it with this mindset and knowing that we want to play the albums like the records, and we even have some of the technology. Like in 502, I had a harmonizer on my solo, kind of like a Steve Vai thing. And I wasn't able to recreate that on the tour because I didn't have the effect that they had at the Music Grinder studio. I couldn't afford it, couldn't find it. So when I did it live, it was just a single guitar. But now with technology and a little pedal, I got a whole harmonizer. So I got all the harmony guitars, all the cool stuff that you hear on the album. So we're going to great lengths just for our own fun. And
Yeah.
the audience, I think, is just gonna love it.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about the project, you know, before I started talking to you, but now I'm like super excited. I want to like fly out there and see the first gig, you know.
There's people, I mean, to be honest, whiskey sells tables for as much as booths downstairs are like 500-600, and upstairs tables $200-300. People are flying in and have already sent me their, look, I bought our table, we got our booth. I'm like, what are you, nuts, man? But we know there'll be more shows happening, but these will be the first 4.
Yeah.
And, you know, something like this has never really happened. So for the people who are going to see these first 4 shows, I mean, the t-shirts we got alone, like, we're all in love with them. They're like the coolest t-shirts I've ever seen. They're so cool.
Wow.
The Kings of Thrash shirts, people are going to love the merch. They're going to love the show. You know, these 2 young guys that we got on drums, we feel a little bit like, you know, you got David and Chris and I, who are the rock and roll, you know, seniors. We've been there, done that. And we've got these 2 kids half our age, you know, this drummer from Peru, Fred Aiken, and our singer guitarist, Chaz Leon, who's from San Diego area. And they're just amazing. I feel like almost I get how Ozzy felt delivering Randy Rhoads, someone like that, because these guys are that fucking good. This drummer is just like, he's playing it. You can see him in the new Bullet Boys video. Holy fuck. That's him.
Oh, is
so
it really?
If you want to check that out, we'll get to the Bullet Boys some plays because they may be mad at us for borrowing their drummer for some shows. But he was just so good. We saw him that night at the Big 4 Jam at the Whiskey Do Slayer. And that's all we needed to see. And then it was on.
Yeah.
And so it's a great project. We're excited about the original stuff. We're excited about these dates. And we got 1 month, and that's the cool thing. We got the luxury of a month. We're really honing in our amp rigs. We've already been through these albums. We've played them through 5, 6, 8, 10 times. And a couple times with Chris now. I think we've done 3 rehearsals with Chris. So we've got a month to just run this stuff. So by the time, that's what we want. And a lot of bands don't have this luxury. A tour comes up so fast. Mm. By the time we get on stage, it's going to be like breathing. It's going to be, we're not going to be thinking about it anymore. We're not going to be trying to remember all these millions of notes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And we've been living this stuff. I've been like doing this like a full-time job for the past couple months, figuring this stuff out. Thankfully, back when I got the gig, I went down to that round building in Hollywood I was telling my parents about, Capitol Records, and I had the engineer take the master tapes for Killing, and Peace cells. Uh, they're right here. And I can't believe, like, I did lose that demo tape of the Rust and Peace riffs. Luckily, I remembered them and we got new songs out of them. But these tapes, on this tape, I have Chris Poland solos and rhythms from Peace Cells soloed with no drums, bass, vocals, just the soloed rhythm guitar in all of his solos. So I can slow them down, and they're at normal speed and half speed on each side. One's normal and one's half. So I can listen to each note. And on this, thank God, I got all the rhythms from Killing and Chris's solos at full speed and half speed, which
Wow.
you need this because the riffs are so fast. If you can't hear it, you'll never decipher some of the notes. So luckily, some miracle, not knowing that this project would ever come up, I think I just wanted to, maybe if I ever wanted to figure out one of Chris's solos again someday for the fuck of it. But I saved these, so these have been invaluable sitting here with my cassette player that's right here, just taking measure by measure and just really isolating every guitar lick, and it starts there. And Fred's doing the same with the drums. He doesn't have the luxury of the solo tracks, but he's got the albums and the remasters, and so that's how we're doing it.
Yeah,
And
that's incredible. That really is. That's a cool story.
that's how I learned this stuff back in the day. So when you go and like maybe see Devil's Island on YouTube, you can hear I was really trying to get Chris's solos as close as possible. Now I don't have to because he's here,
Yeah,
and
right.
the other guy's solo. And so that was a whole new learning experience, learning all Dave's solos.
Hmm.
I have to do, and Chaz is doing some of them. We split them up here and there. And so I think it's just a cool thing. And having the three guitars where it's kind of like that Allman Brothers, Leonard Skinner, Iron Maiden with Yannick and there, and being able to, Chaz can just let the guitar hang like Chris Cornell did and just like sing and then come in on certain parts, man. And it's tight. Like when you hear the video, that rehearsal boots, and we're doing those chromatic runs down, that's the first rehearsal, and it's tight with three guitars. So give us another month, people.
Yeah, that's gonna be insane. Jeff,
We're
what
ready
is
to burn the barn down.
you will. You'll burn a lot of barns down across America and all across the world. One thing I really want to ask you, and being a fan of Megadeth, I don't know the answer, and I really want to hear it from the source. Is why were you fired from Megadeth? I mean, I've heard so many different rumors over the
That's the
years.
question. Was
Yeah,
I
yeah,
fired? Or is that just disinfo and more lies?
yeah. Okay,
No,
please
well,
explain.
all the stories and disinfo and stuff related to me is just untrue, and I've already addressed it on my radio show. They can go back to Music Without Boundaries and find the archives. I kind of gave my final word on all this, not expecting that this Kings of Thrash thing would ever come up all these years later. But it was the drugs. I didn't want to be around it. I went down and got my stuff out of the storage. I called the roadie guy, said, I'm out. I'm going to get my stuff. I took what I came in with, my heads, my cabinets, not any of the ones they bought, because, we had 12 cabinets per side. And I just left because I couldn't. It's what I said before. I'll stay in this thing as long as it's healthy for me.
Yeah,
And when your singer's freebasing 24/7, when I was going over to work up those tracks with Ellefson, that now we have a new original that you'll eventually hear. He was there doing that when I got there the first day. When I got there the next day, 24, 48 hours later, 4 days later, he was doing the same thing. So, there was just going to be no musicality to come from that. And they did get sober, long enough to do the Rust in Peace. And I mean, we were already playing Holy War's Punishment, doing Polaris on tour at sound checks on the Dio tour. So, I mean, the
wow.
stuff, yeah. So it was literally fame at what cost? Or, whatever story.
Yeah, I mean, there was all sorts of rumors. Like one was there, you were sleeping with his girlfriend, and then one was that you were the one doing drugs. I mean, those are just two of the rumors there.
That's what happens when you're doing freebase and you have paranoid delusions of things like what you were just mentioning. And maybe in his mind, all that was very real. But what would you say if you were a diabolical bastard and you wanted to keep your fans from following Jeff Young to his next project, or keep Jeff Young from getting another gig? How would you do it?
Probably start
I'll
rumors.
just leave it at that.
Yeah. All right. All right. That's cool. Now, you mentioned earlier in the interview that you were working on a book. Is that correct?
I had a couple offers, guys wanted to write with me, but I'm a pretty good writer. I used to do a column for guitar for the Practicing Musician
Right.
magazine called Fingerprints. I want to write it myself, but I think I got to live a few more memories and put a few more chapters into the book. But it will definitely cover my Megadeth years. But much like Nick's movie, his life was much richer than Megadeth. People don't know Nick's dad was the horn player for Buddy Rich, the greatest drummer of our parents' generation. Nick grew up following Buddy Rich, on tour because of his father, and set up his drums, at the Hollywood Bowl, smoked a joint with him, so Nick came to his drumming greatness in a really cool way. And he has a lot of stories, and same with me. I mean, there's the Megadeth aspect. I'm a cancer survivor. Same cancer Lance Armstrong had, and his doctor cured me. There's a story there. Both my parents passed of cancer, and I had to save our family business. I ended up going to Wharton, which is a pretty prestigious business school, and learning what it took to do that, and read every business book in the world, from Tom Peters to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People to re-engineering the corporation. The cool thing, I was able to bring that back to music. That's where I went after Megadeth. Then I did the Brazilian project. Lived in Brazil for a few years, and my mom got sick, and I had to go back in the family business again, because that helps. The family business money helped, where the music business economy, it's not a
Sure.
real
Yeah.
steady financial business. So it's been a journey, and I actually gave up music for several years, but I think when you're a true musician, I told you I started playing viola in first grade, and when you fall in love with it, and when it's something you kind of do when you're that young and you don't even know why you're doing it, you're kind of in it for life. It's like the mafia.
Right.
You think you're out, but they always suck you back in.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that Megadeth deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Well, that's funny, and I got a letter from Dave Mustaine a few years ago. There's an episode on my Music Without Boundaries archives called I Got a Letter, and I read the letter, and I tell all the stories. And so if people want to hear all the gory details, they can go find that back episode. He was thinking they were going to get in at a couple years, 2 or 3 gone by, and maybe they will. He wanted me to be there. I think in hindsight, as great as it would be to be there, I don't think I would want to share that same energetic space with such an individual.
Mm. Okay,
And the
so
cool thing is that Ellefson and Poland and me get to go do this thing without the toxicity in the room. So, I mean, who could have dreamed that it would have panned out this way?
yeah.
And it's just one of those things that we just can't say no to it. It's so cool to do, and it sounds so good. Every time we leave rehearsal, we're just like giddy.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the name, the Kings of Thrash. Are you gonna keep that name, or are you guys considering maybe changing it to something else, or is it too late at this point? I mean, everyone knows you guys as that.
Yeah, they already know us. I mean, I think it's kind of a cool name now. At first, I was like, they're going to think we're proclaiming that we're the Kings of Thrash, and we wouldn't want people to think that. It's not anything we're saying about ourselves. It's just a cool name that the management actually came up with. We didn't even think of it.
Mhm.
It was for the tour. It was the thing, the Kings of Thrash, the mega years, and there
Yeah.
were going to be more Megadeth members participating. But if I can be honest with you, we got in a room with them and they couldn't perform the songs because they're so hard. And they just had done too much abuse to their bodies over the years, and they just weren't in condition to do the stuff. And so
Wow.
the 3 guys you're seeing on stage are the guys that, and we didn't play with that. I'm just saying we tried a couple other Megadeth alumni that we would have included. And so, because it's, so we hope that once they hear the originals and see the tour, that the name would be deserved. And
Yeah, well, I definitely think. I mean, you're all extremely talented. I mean, many people feel like,
once they see the T-shirts, man, they ain't gonna care because, I want the T-shirts. I've never, Megadeth had cool T-shirts back in the day. Not this cool, man.
so
I've
when are
had
these
other
T-shirts going to
T-shirts
be
from my other
revealed?
bands. These are the coolest T-shirts we've ever had. So we're all like stoked to get them. We're like, yes. So
And
it's
what?
like everything's falling in place from the
Yeah,
musicians, that everyone. We tried a different drummer. He didn't work out. He was a Megadeth alumni. The guy who's doing it is the guy who's supposed to be doing it. The guy who's singing was meant to do it. I don't think there's anyone else that could do what Chaz is going to step up to that mic and do. And he's got that likability like Dimebag has. He's
hmm,
got that, like, the metal could just love him. When we played the Ultimate Jam, they just loved him.
wow,
So, and they see him in the thing, and we're getting the comments are like, man, Elson and Young did the right thing. They got a singer who can sing,
yeah.
so
I mean, that's
that,
not
and that
that's
makes us doubly excited, and he's ending rehearsal. He's like, man, I'm doing this whole 2 albums and my voice isn't even hurting. So that makes us feel real confident, and we're still a month out.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be pretty exciting times. Jeff, I want to thank you very much for your time. I can't wait to see the live footage of your gigs when it goes on YouTube, and I want to see this T-shirt, man. When is it going to be like made public so we can see it?
As soon as I don't do anything before, everything. That's the other cool thing in this project. Everything is like, we all look at each other in the eye before we take a step, because we want to make sure every step is the right step. So when everyone looks in each other's eye and say, yeah, that's the T-shirt, yeah, that's the set list, yeah, that's the rigs that we're going to use, that's how we're going to set up the stage, the backdrop, the drum heads, the guitar picks with every detail.
Yeah.
And it's not everyone gets a say. The young guys get a vote the same as Chris, David, and I. And that makes it so cool. So,
Yeah, that is cool. It's a true band effort and not just like one or two individuals
and that thing is
driving
it's
it.
effortless. No one's making it happen. This has been totally organic, and there's no trying. And it's like Yoda, do try, don't try, do or do not. And we're just, again, taking one step very carefully. Every lick we write for the originals, the way we're presenting the songs, everything. So, because we know everyone cares a lot. There's a lot of people who hold these albums dear. We're going to be stirring up a lot of nostalgia for people, and we don't take that lightly.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you very much for your time and best of luck. And hopefully
It's
we'll
my
catch up with you again
pleasure.
soon.
Thank you
All right.
so much for taking the time and listening. And I saw that Zeppelin tour, by the way, if that's the song remains the same post.
No, it's actually, unfortunately, it's the one that never happened. It was the 1981. That ad actually came out in the Buffalo News the day that John Bonham died. It was Friday, and that was in Friday's paper. And it was, the way to get tickets was you had to mail in like the like $9 or whatever to get the tickets. It was really weird how they had it. So like that came out when John Bonham died the exact same day for the tour that never happened.
I saw the song remains the same tour. They were
Wow.
wearing the same clothes from the movie. It was at Riverfront Coliseum in Cincinnati, and it was the show right before the Who tragedy at Riverfront Coliseum, when you
Right.
remember 11 people got trampled to death.
Yeah, I
And
do remember that because the Who played Buffalo the next day and everyone was freaking out, even though it wasn't general admission. It was, everyone had assigned seats, but still they were freaking out and nobody could go anywhere near there if they didn't have a ticket. I remember that. You must have been pretty young when you saw them. That what was, like, you were
yeah,
like
we would take a
13,
bus to
14?
we would take a bus from Dayton to Cincinnati if the concert was at Riverfront. There was a great venue in Dayton called Hare Arena that recently got destroyed in a tornado that swept through the town. But I mean, we got to see, I have all the ticket stubs. I did shows on my radio show where I just went through my ticket stubs and just reminisced and played the music from those shows. I
That's
mean, the
cool.
bills were crazy, man. I saw everybody, the biggest bands, like before they were big, Blue Oyster Cult, Cheap Trick, you know, to these, some of the underground bands like Stars and
Yeah.
Angel and Artful Dodger, and just bands, Riot, opening for, who knows who, right? Saw Ted Nugent a bunch of times. Just so many concerts came through, and we'd go there at because we wanted to be front row because there was general admission before the Who thing. They're kind of coming back to it, but it got real strict after that Who thing, and it was only reserved seating. But we'd want to get as close to the stage, and we want to be leaning on that stage if we could. I got to see Van Halen destroy Black Sabbath on the Never Say
78
Die tour, on the Van Halen 1 tour. I was right in front of Eddie, just hanging on the stage, seeing how his fingers moved, because there was no YouTube and we didn't have any idea what he was doing back then. Like I had figured out that tapping part to Eruption at the end that sounds like Beethoven by playing it on 2 strings and picking it. Once I saw him doing that, I was like, well, that's a lot easier. Shit. So it was a great time. And we saw, and that was the amazing thing was to come back and play Dayton at Hare Arena opening for Dio. And my parents now, who I took to see Holsworth when I moved out to GIT, and they were like, what are we doing? Are we crazy letting our son do this? And now I'm playing that big 30,000 seat hockey rink, and my parents are backstage thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. Even though the band's name Megadeth,
Yeah.
But,
Wow. You have some great stories. Yeah. That must have been something playing in front of your parents, like, and
just all the kids from high school and people who knew you and teased you, and jocks who bullied you and stuff, who ended up working at McDonald's and doing nothing,
Yeah. How do you come down from a gig like that? I mean, that must be such a hot.
I'm thinking about this because we have 4 gigs in a row, right? I'm like, how am I going to get to sleep after?
Yeah.
That's why, to be honest, that's why a lot of people unfortunately get into drinking and doing downers on the road to come down and go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to wake up early enough and figure out this month I'm going to kind of try to time out and get in the rhythm so I can play the show and go to bed after, I'm thinking the show's going to be pretty tiring. So I think by the end of the show, we're all going to be ready to pass out, because I mean, just playing so far is hard, but doing Killing by themselves, then you do them both, plus the encore of surprises we got planned,
Yeah, it's going to be pretty intense.
And if this continues, I mean, who knows, we'll do maybe some post JY, post So Far stuff, like we were talking about, maybe doing Go to Hell, 99 Ways to Die, these things in the future. So the sky's the limit. And it's up to the people.
It's going to be exciting to see, what transpires and how far this can go. I think it has a lot of potential. I mean, it really does.
I think once they hear the originals, once they see it, most of the naysayers and really like people who think they got to take sides, Megadeth or this, and they don't, man. There's room for everyone. Megadeth plays the same 10, 11 songs every show. They're never going to do stuff from Killing. I would really doubt that, Maybe they do In My Darkest Hour here and there, but so we're not hurting anybody. This is all for positivity, because people, they ask for it. It's like you guys ask for it. So we're giving you what you asked for in the best and only way we can, because this is the only way we could ever do this. So we're really excited. We're working hard. I've never worked so hard for anything. And we know once we do this, we release some good originals. It's really going to catapult from there. And I think the originals have all the elements that Megadeth fans will dig. Plus it's more melodic, and it's got other stuff, that would never be at home in a Megadeth setting or on a Megadeth record. We have the leeway to take the best of those influences, which some of those influences were ours, because we were what made those albums sound the way they sound. Yeah. So we can take those things and then mix it with all the stuff we've learned since. There's some punk stuff to it, because I still love the Sex Pistols. Highly recommend that documentary Pistol. If you
I saw that. That was incredible. Yeah.
I'm trying to get Ellefson to watch. He doesn't have Hulu. Everyone should watch that, because Steve Jones came in the studio and played on Anarchy. He rode his Harley in with a broken right arm. I'm like, how's this sucker gonna play? And he played, the solo and did the whole rhythms through the whole song. So we actually have 3 rhythm guitars on that song. So live we'll be really recreating that. But yeah, that made me really reconnect. I think that documentary, if people watch that, we have a lot of that spirit, really reminded me the tone we needed to set for this, minus the being dicks to each other in the band. We
Yeah.
just, we want to keep this street level and keep that punk rock attitude to it. Because Megadeth has always had that balance of really musical, death-defying technical chops,
Hmm.
but with a punk rock attitude, right? And
Sure.
balancing that, I think, it's a cool challenge.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, like I said before, I'm super excited. So, thanks again, and like let's catch up in a couple months and talk
Cool.
again about
All
those
right, I'm
gigs. All
sure
right.
you can edit that into something cool.
Yeah, I will definitely.
I'm
I'm
gonna
the
get
king
back
about it.
to noodling. All
Yeah.
right. We'll see you guys in a month.